All right, so today we're going to talk about the basics of digital marketing. Okay, so digital marketing is part of our communications module. Communications is part of promotions, right? So, promotions, if you remember correctly, has advertising, sales promotions, public relations, direct marketing, and digital marketing. And within communication, we have this framework called the 6M's model. And within message and media, we have digital. And digital very much follows the marketing funnel and the customer journey, which we'll talk about in a second. But just for illustrative purposes, right? So, the customer journey is basically you as a customer, potential customer, go through all of these different phases of the marketing funnel: the awareness, the interest, the consideration, and ultimately conversion. And then actually, there is even post conversion or post purchase. And basically, you have all these touch points that hopefully get you to advance or to go to the next phase of the funnel. And that's what the customer journey is all about. And this is very important when it comes to digital marketing because a lot of our strategies in terms of what type of message, what type of content has to do, and what type of platform or medium has to do with the objectives at each of the different stages of the marketing funnel. So real quick, the communications module, which basically applies for every type of communication. I mean, what varies here is how this gets executed, but they all have objectives. Objectives are often in terms of top of the funnel, also called TOFU, which is the awareness stage, middle of the funnel, MOFU, which is the interest consideration stage, and then BOFU, which is bottom of the funnel, which is the conversion stage. So basically, all these objectives is to try to advance through each of these different phases. Now, we also need to understand who is our target, right? To whom is this communication being addressed? And we can get very, very specific. And that's why we build, and we'll see later, something called a customer persona, where we can include things like interests, activities, geographic. So think of all the different dimensions of segmentation, meaning demographics, geographics, psychographics, which is mainly activities, interest, and opinion, and behavioral, which is how basically the benefits and how you use the product. All these things can be used in the targeting engine. So this is one of the beauties of digital marketing. Then we have the message, which in digital we call it content marketing. Okay. And then we have, and again, message can have different formats: video, stories, reels. So there is all these different formats, right? Pictures, obviously, text. Then we have media, which is the platform. How are you going to deliver it? Are you going to deliver it on Facebook? Are you going to deliver it on Instagram, on TikTok, Pinterest, Snapchat? So there's all these different platforms. And then you want to see the impact, right? So how much money are you going to spend and how are you going to measure the impact? So the first thing that is important to understand is that there is really three types of media or three groups. And by the way, you can have combination of these, right? So let's start with the easiest one. I think it's the easiest one because it's the easiest to identify because it usually says paid or sponsored and you have to pay somebody. So think of you have this message that you want to deliver, right, to your customers, or let's just say to your target. And The moment you have to pay somebody to deliver that message, then you're in pay territory. So pay-per-click, which we'll see a lot of examples, are the sponsored shopping or search ads. They're called pay-per-click because this was a model invented by Google, where you basically paid only if people clicked. Display ads are the banner ads or display ads that can appear targeted or untargeted, but mostly targeted. Like if you're reading a newspaper article, and so you have a pop-up of an ad that has nothing to do with what you're reading, or may not have anything to do with what you're reading. Well, it could if it's contextual targeting. I don't want to get too technical. Retargeting, again, retargeting is basically when you accept the cookies and of a website, and then those cookies through something called the ad exchange are targeted when you are in another page. So again, this is in this case, retargeting would be like if all of a sudden you're on another, you're buying a car or you're looking at a car dealer, right? And then all of a sudden you're on a completely different website and you get an ad uh, for the car dealer that you were looking at. Paid influencers, I think that's very obvious. So we have influencers, a big part of social media, and most of them are paid. There are different structures. Paid content promotion. So again, this is if there is some sort of promotion, some sponsorship. Social media ads. So this is all the content created in social media. So we separate social media from search and display. So social media is all the different platforms. If you have a sponsored post or if you boost a post and you have to pay Meta or TikTok, then that's social media ads. So that's a paid media. Earned media is when you don't have to pay for somebody to deliver your message. So that's kind of the ideal situation, right? You want earned media because you don't have to pay. So these are mentions, shares. So probably the most important objective when you create content in social media is for people to share it or to repost it. Reviews are also earned media. So if you're going to Yelp to look for a restaurant to eat and you're looking at the reviews, or if you're searching and you get the Google profiles or Google Map results or local business results, and you're going through the reviews and the ratings, then that would be considered earned. And then all media is basically what you create with those things that you control and that you own. So your website, your mobile site, your blog, your social media channels, and all the organic results basically, organics again, it's not paid and it's not earned. So basically what you're trying to do when you have earn and own is you're trying to figure out with content how to drive earned media, right? So the better the content, the more entertaining. So if you think of like, for example, influencers, that's why sometimes you'll hear the term creators. They like to be called creators, and there are content creators. They create content that drive earned media, so they get huge engagement and then a lot of sharing. Now, the other thing that you're trying to do, okay, is with your own media, create more exposure or visibility with SEO. SEO stands for search engine optimization. So, in other words, it's when you're found but without paying. And if it's PPC, it means that you're paying. Okay. So, if you do all these things in a systematic manner, then you'll get the most out of the three. You can also have hybrids, and we'll talk about those in a second. Okay, so why digital? Essentially is because it's a lower cost. And this is cost per thousand impressions or CPM, which is the way you can compare the cost of all these things. So what has happened as a result in the past 10 years is digital was about 25% of spending, and now is, well, this is 2024, so it's probably around 75% or higher. Okay. In terms of skills, analytics continues to be the number one skill that employers and companies are looking for. So different platforms are best for different types of target, right? As expected, Facebook is better for boomers, and then Instagram, millennials and Gen Z, um, Twitter or X for higher education, LinkedIn professional, and so on. So you have different content. Okay, so mostly Facebook is mostly photos, live video, um, TikTok, entertainment, humor, a lot of influencer marketing and relationship building is not as strong. But then again, it depends, right? I would say something that is missing here because this is not the latest and greatest is shopping. TikTok Shop is catching up, and I'm not saying in terms of dollars, but in terms of users who shop, is catching up to Amazon. The other thing is if we look at by industry, some platforms are still better than others. By the way, this 2022, you know, users, I'm pretty sure Facebook's still the biggest one, but I'm also pretty sure TikTok is now probably very close to YouTube and maybe even past Instagram. Okay, WhatsApp, I don't know why WhatsApp is here because WhatsApp is really used differently. It's really a messaging. Is I wouldn't consider it, the same way. Okay, so we already talked about demographics. What's interesting is also by industry. So for retail, for example, as expected, Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook is really ideal. But then X or Twitter and LinkedIn, not so much, and YouTube, not so much either. Snap, really good because you have, again, augmented reality that you can use for retailing certain products. Financial services, because of the older demographics, Facebook, ideal. But then Instagram, Pinterest, not ideal. So this is, I would say, one of my favorite charts that I've been able to find because it does a great job of showing which industry is which. So we already talked about the customer journey. So when we look at the customer journey, in addition to the funnel stages and the touch points, we're looking at the actions and if there was a positive, neutral, or negative experience. And obviously, if it's positive, it will advance or help you advance. Negative actually may help you go the other way, which is something we want to avoid. By the way, there is many versions of the customer journey. Some are very, very detailed, okay? But they all have stages, touch points. Some of them also contain metrics and even opportunities and so on. So there is a lot of different options. The other thing is notice it says persona. So you can build a customer journey for each persona. So what is a persona? It's kind of like a consumer profile, okay? And you have all sorts of information for each of these different persona. And I like um, this particular template or format because it has something that I consider very important, which is the interaction with digital media. Because it's okay if I know hobbies, interests, objection, challenges, demographics, but if I don't know how this person interacts with digital media, then how I'm going to choose which media to use. So, like we're talking about, Google Ads Meta Manager does an awesome job of help of targeting based on hobbies, leisure, interests, behaviors, and so on. So this is a video of the customer journey. I'm not going to show it here. I showed this in class. So let's go back to this funnel. Top of the funnel. And I do want you to remember this abbreviation TOFU because it's so often used. Again, here we're in the awareness stage and we're trying to generate interest. So trying to get you to the next stage which is interest. And how do we do that? By capturing your attention. So here is where the journey really initiates. Middle of the funnel, now I got your interest. So I'm trying to get you into the consideration phase so that you become a potential qualified customer. You still haven't bought, but now I got you hopefully convinced to go to the next stage. And here is when you become, you know, a qualified customer. And a customer means, you're ready to buy. Now, bottom of the funnel, be careful because I can get you all the way to the shopping cart, but then you may drop out. And we'll talk about what are some of the reasons why more than 50% of people drop out in the shopping cart. So, interestingly enough, when it comes to conversion, meaning purchase, okay, the one that seems to have so here, how did people hear about your company versus what caused them to buy? The one that caused them to buy, the highest one, is friend or direct traffic. So this makes perfect sense, right? It was referred or recommended, say, by a friend. Or direct traffic is, you buy Nike, you go directly to a Nike page. You maybe have it bookmarked already. Okay, so that's going to have the highest conversion. And then also heard about the company. This is going to be through a friend or direct traffic. I wish they separated these two because they're very different. Now, paid search is also good for conversion, right? Social is also pretty good, but not as good as paid search because paid search is a little different. Paid search, you're already searching for something. Now, what's interesting is organic may be the best way to hear about it, but not necessarily the best to convert. So this is very interesting because it's clearly showing that paid search and paid social is important and sometimes necessary. So you have different types of services. We talked about content marketing, SEO, pay-per-click advertising. Often this is done by SEO or sometimes, SEO or SEM, search engine marketing agencies. Email marketing, PR, I would separate PR and then social media. So if we start with, well, why do we have so many websites? Well, some of them are for sales, and some maybe for streaming, for advertising. Well, I would say New York Times is for reading, but it's really advertising model. And then obviously each one has its own advertising to try to generate sales and awareness. So conversions typically refers to purchase, but it could also be lead generation or other types of things. Because if, for example, you have a legal firm, well, you wouldn't expect a somebody to buy tens of thousands of dollars of legal services just by going to a website. So, but if people filled out a form and submitted, that could be considered a type of conversion. Now, in the case of mobile, it works different. Mobile apps, and let's talk specifically about Apple, they have implemented, and you all have seen it, but may have not heard the term, this thing called app tracking transparency. So, app tracking transparency basically means this thing that Apple basically, created. I'm trying to show the. Okay, so
build a website you love with Wix.
All right.
For your words.
Yeah. This is deep in our.
So what happens is we have this notification that we all get whenever we download an app, where it basically tells you.
In modern Formula One, the challenge is to find that 1 second of lap time advantage.
Okay.
And we looked.
I think, isn't it ironic that I'm talking about advertising? Okay, so this thing is a little blurry, but it's the one that says allow to share or do not allow to share. So that's ATT, app transparency. So Apple is giving you the option to either share your information with all the other apps or not for that particular app. So what happened is in the past, before iOS 14.5, this ID or identification for each one of your phones has this ID. And what it would do is automatically, whatever you did in one website, sorry, in one app, it would share with all the other apps. So if you were buying, say, the Macy's app, it would share that information with Instagram if you have Instagram. And then Instagram would know and basically target you, and then Macy's would target you ads with with Instagram. And they were really good targeting because you had just used it, and that information sometimes could be instantly. So the retargeting was really, really good. So Apple, and in a way, when it was first reported, it was like declaring war on social media, particularly Meta or Instagram, because now you can opt in or opt out, and 60% of the people, based on the data out there. Maybe it's changed a little bit, but let's just say more than half people say, no, I don't want to share. So that's become a big thing. Okay, so we talked about websites with cookies, and we talked about mobile with ATT. So we have two big areas in digital. We have basically search and display, which essentially is mostly Google. So this is SEO, search engine optimization, and SEM, search engine marketing, and then and obviously all the websites. It really has to do with your websites. And then you have social media. So those are the two big parts in digital. So here's a video that talks a little about how the internet works. It's very interesting, right? So let's talk about in the case of Google. So Google has this bot, okay, and called the Google bot. And basically, think of the web of all these links connected to each other, okay, and those bots are crawling. These bots are often called spiders. So let's show you different illustrations. This is very, very important. Okay, so you have your website here, and let's just begin over here. So here you have the search engine, and the search engine has this spider, which is crawling through every link of every page. And notice I said the word page because websites have pages, okay? And it's basically collecting all the information, okay? Collecting all the information. That's called indexing. Actually indexing is when it puts it into a database. So it's collecting all this information, so from all these different pages, and it puts it in an index. So think of an index of a large database. So basically when you search for something, it's not happening live. It's happening based on when this index happened. So let's say, you search for something and it has information from, say, 24 hours ago. It could be even faster depending on what you're searching. So now you have this index of all these pages, but then how do you determine the ranking? So the ranking is determined based on three very important factors: relevance, popularity, and user behavior. So relevance has to do with the keywords that you use in your search. So if you're looking for running shoes, you want information that has to do with running shoes. Now, how do you, there is millions of pages that have something to do with running shoes. So how do you determine the ranking? So the page rank is something that has to do with the popularity. Okay. So Larry Page, the co-founder of Google, has this page rank based on links, more precisely backlinks. So this is your website, you have all these links. Now the size of these bubbles, let's just call them for now popularity. So the more popular the link from a website that is referring to your website, the better it is. Think of like a voting system, right? And how do you determine that? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. The other thing is user behavior, right? So click-through rate of that particular website, so click-through rate is how many people are clicking on that website. Bounce rate, meaning how many people are staying on that website. So the bounce, you mean you left. The speed of the website. So all of these are factors. So let's look at an example here. Okay. So let's go back to our shoes example, but let's be a little bit more general. So we have shoes and we get this search results. By the way, the page where you get all these results is called SERP, or search engine results page. And obviously you have many pages, but the one that is most important is page one, right? People usually don't go beyond page one. Now here we're showing organic results. Organic means they're owned. So in other words, these are the results that are not paid. These are just the websites, right? So it really is determined by your websites, and what are the most important factors. Well, we don't know precisely, but we do know certain things. Keywords, backlinks, engagement with the page, niche expertise, I'm going to call that relevant because it has to do with what you're searching, and then consistent publication of high quality content. So if you created this wonderful website 10 years ago and haven't added anything to it, then it's not going to rank very high, even though it ranked very high in the past. So let's talk about this thing. What are these backlinks? Okay. Backlinks are usually highlighted in blue when you're reading, for example. So here we have an example of an article in Forbes magazine. You're in this article, and then it says he's the founder of Backlinko, which is highlighted in blue. We've all seen this highlighted in blue. If it's highlighted in blue, you know it's a link to a website. So basically, this is Forbes, right? Forbes, you're reading the Forbes article in the Forbes.com domain. And then is directing you or directing to this backlink of websites. So backlinks can come from blogs, from a variety of things, social media, but not as much of an effect as others. So basically you have different types of links, and it sounds complicated, but it's not complicated at all. So let's start with the first one that we just mentioned. When the link comes from another website to your website, it's an inbound link. Now, if it's going from your website to another website, then it's an outbound link. So if this is Forbes and it puts a link to Backlinko, that's an outbound link, right? Now, if my website is Backlinko and the link is coming from Forbes, it's an external website, then that would be an internal link. So think of, let's say, I don't know, you have you have a restaurant and somebody wrote an article about best, let's just say, Cuban food in Miami. And they mentioned it's in blue letters and there is a link. So that's an example of an inbound link. Then you have internal links. So what is an internal link? Well, that's very simple. Internal links is all the links within your website. So if you go to Nike, you're in the home page, but you really are interested in, I don't know, running shoes. So you click on running shoes and that takes you to the link of running shoes, right? So you have this domain, subdomains, and so on, and we'll talk about that later. Now, one thing that we haven't talked too much about yet is this popularity thing. So this popularity thing is all of these pages have rankings of how popular they are, and they're called authority scores, right? So if the New York Times writes about you, is different than if your cousin who has a blog that nobody has read or a new blog talks about you. So the authority score is very, very important. So you have an authority score for your website. So that tells you how well it does in the rankings, and then the authority score of the backlinks. So I'm going to show you a little example. So this is a tool that I use in my digital marketing class. And you can see it has these authority scores, right? So it's basically measuring the authority score. So you have, and then you have the traffic, and look at this backlinks. So the good thing is we can get this information, right? And we can get it not only for you, but I can add a competitor. So La Carreta is a Cuban restaurant. So let's just put Sergio's, okay, .com, which is another Cuban restaurant, and click compare. And now we have authority score, referring domains. So the backlinks could be for the domains or could be for pages. Notice domains is a much smaller number. So domain would be, in this case, lacarreta.com, that's the domain. But it has many pages, and this refers to the pages. And domain usually is a similar number to IP addresses. Then we have monthly visits. And then most importantly, what I like about this report is it basically tells you why you're doing poorly. So here you have 81 to 100 backlinks. So if I'm Sergius, I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? And it tells you, well, you're not doing well with places like TripAdvisor. And TripAdvisor is a very important domain. And they are referring domain. Oh, interesting enough. They're referring domain to Sergius, but not to La Carreta. Okay, because so let me explain. So what happens is my analysis. It says you, I am La Carreta. So it's telling me which are my opportunities, right? So it's telling me how to improve. How do I improve compared to Sergius? All right, I can stay on this. I'm going to do a separate tutorial. So I just wanted to kind of tell you these things are not fiction, these are real. And you can basically, yeah, you can track them with programs such as SEMrush. So the hierarchy of the website is very important. So you want everything to be found easily. All the keywords in the content. So you have the meta description, which is kind of the main description of your website. That's what appears when you do a direct search or you put the domain or the homepage, let's say the homepage of your website. And you have full control of that depending on which platform you're using. Then another category that we have, and this is not in the right place, is the Google profile, but I'm going to put that here. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so organic results, also social media. So we have, Google actually has something called the Search Console, which allows you to keep track of what's going on with your website, but Moz and SEMrush does it not only for you, but also for your competitors. See, so here we have some examples, Ulta, Sephora, and MAC Cosmetics, and then here is the Moz example for Home Depot and Lowe's. So then we have this category, sometimes called local business results, sometimes they call it Google Maps. Now, whenever you search for this, it used to be businesses, now they call it places. So let's see what the latest one is. So if I go over here, and so typically local business when you're looking something like it says local. So I'm gonna put Cuban food, right? Oh, there you go. It's usually the first one, right? So we have near me, and you see places. So these are based on Google Maps. So because I put near me, that's part of the keyword, then basically it shows geographic location is important, but not necessarily the ranking is based on location only. It's based on many other things. So let's see, I'm trying to see. So Casa Cuba, so this one, okay. Yeah, Casa Cuba is not the one that is closest, but it's the one that appeared first. Because it may be influenced by other websites such as Yelp. Okay, so Yelp is also has a top 10 best Cuban near me. So you see, all Havana, Cuba is is ranked very high. So here it also appears high. So it may be influenced by that. So that's called, sometimes they call it local SEO. You also hear the Google Maps, Google Pack. So they have all this terminology. The good thing is most people don't know that you don't need to have a physical location to create a Google profile. So here you see this is photography. And just because you create one appear doesn't mean that it's going to appear right away. So when I created mine at the beginning, he had no activity, so nothing appeared. So some best practices, we have this acronym NAP, name, address, and phone. Everything is accurate. Obviously, the reviews, images, okay, mobile friendly. So all of these are best practices. So these are best practices for local website. No, it's just these are best practices for website. So this goes over here. So this is in terms of user experience. Okay, so this comes from an article called 5 Seconds to Engage and Impress. So products, services, pictures and videos, product services, pictures of happy people, contract. It doesn't mean that it needs to have all of them, but if it has a lot of these, it will help in what is called the user experience. Okay, contrasting color, call to action, benefits are clear, bold headings, simple entry form, easy path to conversion, simplified checkout, gets checkout, free or reduced shipping, tax and shipping earlier. If you go through this list and you open the Apple page, I'm not going to do it right now, I do it in class, you'll see how it does super well, or it does amazingly well in all of these best practices. Okay, so let's just continue here. All right, so this is, let's call it SEO, which includes local. So this is basically for organic results. Now, PPC or search engine marketing, so this sometimes is called PPC, which stands for pay per click, is when you have to pay. So in this case, let's go back over here. Okay. So if you notice, I said that this could be hybrids because if I click here where it says more places, now we see the word sponsored. Okay. Okay. So guess what? This is now a paid result. See, these are paid results. This is not, this is organic, right? Uh, Now you would say, so here's where things get interesting. Google profiles have something that is very important. In my opinion, so let me first say, the industry calls them owned media because it's kind of like a mini website. But I think that it could also be considered earned media because typically, I mean, CasaQ immediately you see reviews, you see numbers, you read the comments. So they could be either one, okay? And that's something that also happens with review sites like Yelp. Review sites like Yelp or TripAdvisor are considered earned media because they're basically for reviews. But they also have a paid version, so you can get a sponsor. So if you go to, let's go back over here, right? We'll go over here to Yelp, and now you have sponsored, right? So that's paid, obviously. And then, well, it also has a profile. This is just, this is a profile. Um, but because even to have the profile, you need to, well, you can see it's basically reviews. So, so that's why it's considered earned because it's basically a review site. Now, it's a review, but it could also be paid, right? Because it also has sponsored. So I'm just making you aware of this because it's not so black and white. You have like shades of gray. Okay, now we're going back to our shoes example, but here now we're getting paid results. And how do we know that they're paid? Well, because they have the word ad. Sometimes that's the word ad or sponsor. Now, when it comes to paid, I'm going to put this a little bigger. We really have two things going on here. We have something called the maximum bid. And the maximum bid is the bid that you're putting for the keywords. So in this case, it's shoes, but you can have very long keywords like best Cuban food in Miami or best Cuban food or, best pork sandwich or best whatever, or just, so you can have all of these words and anybody who has, again, it needs to be relevant because if you don't even have a restaurant and you're bidding for those keywords, you can have a problem. But let's assume that that it's relevant. By the way, it would probably not appear anyway because of what I'm going to tell you next, which is the second factor. So you have the ranking here is affected by your maximum bid and your quality score. Because yes, even you pay the highest bid, but if you're not very relevant, okay, and we'll talk about quality score in a second, it's not gonna appear. It's not gonna appear in the first one, okay? So here we have, just to review, maximum bid on the keywords. So whenever you go, and I don't have a chance now to show you, but if you go to the Google Ads Manager, it will ask you to create a list, a group, an ad group of keywords. And then you're going to bid on each one and it will give you a range. Okay. So that's the bidding. Now, the quality score is very similar to the authority score because this has to do with keywords, the landing page, expected click through rate, landing page experience, relevance, so basically all the SEO characteristics. But it also has this thing called ad formats. Ad formats is these things. Now, something that is important is the ads are mostly based on the content of what you put here in the ad. Okay, and SEO is mostly based on the website. So you can see that maybe the reason why Allbirds came first it's probably because Allbirds sells all types of shoes. Adidas, on the other hand, similar to Nike, well, it's basically sneakers, right? So let's talk a little bit about these keywords. So you can have again short. So these are called short tail keywords, one word. Long tail combination. Branded keywords, so Nike sneakers. So you can actually. So let's do that example for a second right now. So I'm gonna put Nike. Okay, so let's close this. I'm gonna put Nike shoes or Nike sneakers, right? And as expected, you have Nike. But look at this, Under Armour, Tricky, and these are sponsored, right? So if it's sponsored, they're paid. These are called shopping ads. But you see, they're bidding also on the keywords when you're searching for Nike. So you can bid on keywords for your competitor. But remember, your Nike will do better because you have the quality score. Then you have something called LSI. Let's put this a little bit bigger. So these keywords have to do if you're searching for some sort of topic. So content, marketing, SEO strategies. So it's an overview of a topic. Okay. And then you have geo-targeted, which is basically if you're looking for a particular location, which is kind of what we were doing before. So let's do the example. And this usually is used for like articles. So if I put content marketing, or better yet, SEO strategies, probably SEMrush is going to come up. So first we have an AI, an AI result, and then we have some sponsor results. So not surprisingly, SEMrush is there because these are all people who are selling services for SEO. In the organic results, then we have Google, article by Forbes, Reddit, and so on. Oh, look at this. This company does exist, Backlinko. No, I knew that it existed. I just didn't realize that it seems that it's very well known. So what's the difference between these things? Well, what happens is a word like shoes is going to have very high competition. Therefore, the cost is going to be very high. But then if you have red Nike men's running shoes, that will have a lower cost because not everybody has red Nike running shoes. And it also has a higher probability of conversion because if there is not a lot of competition and you have a good chance of appearing because you are that running store, a running shoe store or running sneakers that bid high on that one and you don't have that much competition. You have, obviously you have the big ones, but you're appearing. You're appearing, so then you have a higher probability of conversion. So remember, in the paid results, local business results can also have sponsor ads. And what we notice, this has become very popular, shopping ads. Now, here is something that I don't want you to get confused because a lot of my students get confused. So let's go back to running shoes. Okay, so let's put running or running sneakers. These are sponsored, they are shopping ads. But if they don't say the word sponsor, they're organic. Okay, so these are all organic. So I don't want you to get confused because they look like shopping ads and these did not exist. What happens is that when things make more sense to do with images, they decided why just shopping ads? Let's also have the organic results in images. So again, do not get confused. Ad or paid ads always say the word ad or the word sponsor or something to that effect. So going back to our famous display ads, right? So they have usually this format. Sometimes they can be very annoying because they can appear anytime. And we already talked about retargeting, remarketing. You visit a website, you accepted the cookies. And what are cookies? They are like small text files that a website downloads to the user device and track the behavior. So basically, almost everything people do on the internet, remember the login information, helping companies create targeted ads. So basically, that's what a cookie is. Well, I don't have time to show you how to create ads, but here is the Google Ad Manager. There is a tutorial for that. So you can create text ads, display ads. So this is actually me. Photography is my hobby, as probably you know. Then we have some best practices. So you really want to have keywords that match what people are searching for. And you want to make sure that your search result matches with the landing page. So if you're looking for Caribbean cruises, you don't get a landing page for Alaska. And the URL obviously is a very important component of your keywords. And usually the domain very difficult, right? But then you can have these path fields or subdomains if people are looking for indoor plants or bonsais or whatever you want to have it there. You also want to have it in the short description. So, and if if you do something that is very unique, like eco-friendly tours, then you have a much better chance of appearing if you highlight that. Some more best practices, if you have different locations, mention it there. Call to actions. Here you have most popular call to actions, like get, buy, shop. So here are some best practices. So let's talk a little bit about, we haven't talked much about metrics, right? So what are some of the metrics that are used in search and display? Some of the metrics that are used are impressions, reach, frequency, or click-through rate, or visitors to your website, people who left your website, conversion rate. So what is click-through rate? Click-through rate is basically the percentage of people that clicked on your ad, okay? So and then conversion rate is the percentage of people who came to your website and actually bought something. So you have, here is an acquisition report from Google Analytics, which is something that you can all get for free for your website. So it tells you people who are coming to your website, where are they coming from? Like organic, direct, social, referrals. Are they users or new users? How many sessions? So for the same user, how many times they came to your website? The percentage that left right away. How many pages per session? So did they go more than one page? How many pages? How long did they stay? And then if they bought something, how many transactions and the revenue, right? So this is for organic, okay? So this is a simple example. So it opens a little spreadsheet here with the most important metrics, okay? So let's say I spent $10,000. I got 100,000 impressions, 3,000 clicks. So then my cost per click, very simple, B divided by D, right? So I spent $10,000 and got 3,000 clicks. So I'm paying $3 per click. Then I have 300 transactions and then click-through rate. What is click-through rate? As we talked about it, oops, oh yeah, well, it's showing it for me over here. Click-through rate is basically the number of clicks. So this is D3 divided by the number of impressions, right? So of all the impressions is every time an ad displays, how many times people clicked on it. Conversion rate, well, here we have 300 transactions, right? And then 300 clicks. So if clicks means they are in the landing page, they're on your website. How many bought something or how many transactions are there? Actually, we're assuming one transaction per person. So let's say that that's the case. So that's 10%. Now, if the average price per transaction was $100, we multiply $100 times 300, then this is our sales in dollars or sales revenue. So units divided, sorry, multiply times price. So transactions multiply times price. We don't have units, we have transactions. And then a very important metric is called ROAS, or return on advertising spend. So basically, this is my sales revenue divided by how much I spend. If it's 3 to 1 or higher, it's usually pretty good. We don't know for sure because we don't have the margin information, which would give us the return on investment. But it's a quick way to know if it was effective or not. My God, we are in the 54-minute mark and I haven't even talked about social media. Okay, social media. Well, this is a little easier, right? So we have a lot of people in social media. We already talked about which are the most popular platforms for each one. So in social media, the way to get found is through tagging. So we have different types of tagging. And the most popular one, as you all know, is hashtags, right? So hashtags is you put this symbol before a word, and then you can search to see how many people are following or how many people are using that hashtag. And that is a good way to be found. So here we have Teresa Prendes, took this picture in Puerto Rico. So anybody who searches, so this is Instagram, somebody who searches hashtag Puerto Rico, then they will find her picture. Now with Airbnb, it's a little different. But actually, in this case, yes, you can be found if you do a search Airbnb. Where it's different is here. If you tag Airbnb, they will control if you are in the tag images or not. Okay, so we already talked about hashtags. So, as we talked about before, social media, each platform is different for each audience. So we have, in the case of Vogue, and they have about 10 million followers on Facebook, but then they have 5 times more, almost 5 times more on Instagram, and it could be because of the audience and the format. I mean, Instagram is mostly for pictures, Vogue is for pictures, and then not so many for TikTok. Well, 3.3 is a lot, but I'm saying compare to 47 million. So, this is not the preferred format. And then when we look at LinkedIn, again, it's a professional website. You're not going to have as many followers. Twitter or X is mostly about news, trending topics, celebrities. So we have different indicators for the funnel. So typically when somebody is following or likes a brand, they're somewhere in the interest consideration stage. Awareness, well, if you haven't even seen it yet, then it's hard to know, because what happens is a lot of people get a lot of feed, like we all get, but we don't know how many people actually viewed it. um, we know conversion because it's a purchase. Loyalty or repurchase, again, we talked about reposts, reshares are usually good indicators. So what are the most important metrics when it comes to social media? Well, here we have a report, and this report is from Facebook. So we have reach. Again, this is the number of individuals. It says who have seen the post, but we don't know really if they have seen it. Okay, so you reach that many people. Now, impressions, again, why is it higher than reach? Because one person may get more than once the same ad. Then you have amount spent. So this is how much you spent, $50. You got clicks to the links. So people, this is, so again, if you saw an ad and you clicked on it, and if you clicked on the link, then the link should take you to that website, hopefully. So you have a link to click-through rate of, so I've never seen link click-through. Wow, this is complicated way. Click-through rate is just the number of clicks divided by the number of impressions. Okay, so and it's usually put in a percentage. So this should be 9.2%. And then cost per click, again, cost $50, you got 48 clicks. So this divided by this. Post engagement, this is after they engage, how many people actually, post engagement could be, um, so for each post, the engagement is basically likes, comments, shares. Now saves can be included, divided by impressions. So that's your engagement rate. If you don't have sometimes you don't have the views or impressions, then you just use this number as engagement. So this post, wow, that's very low engagement. I think it's not referring to this one. Okay. All right. So marketing rule of seven. Usually we need to see a message 7 times before people take action. So typically you know what part of the funnel you're in based on the call to action. So learn more, you're going from awareness to interest, consideration, sign up, maybe for, in this case, I think it's a recipe, and then conversion, get them to conversion, order now or buy now. So social media, we use the Banner Manager, and we can do all our targeting. By the way, they all work very similar. So if you use the LinkedIn manager, the TikTok manager, they're all very similar. So let's talk a little bit about TikTok. So TikTok considers itself more of an entertainment platform where people have the sound on. And this is from a presentation that they made that I attended. Full screen escapism, bespoke creative, diverse community, creators. The creators is so they make it very easy for you to create. So that's why it has all these tools. You can use CapCut to edit videos real quick. It's short format videos. You can use your basically with your phone. Okay, average time is 2.5 hours, but we all know it differs by age group. So this age group, 18 to 19, last I heard, is about 4 hours. Well, this group is probably 10 minutes. So again, I'm not going to talk much about TikTok. You guys are all on TikTok. It cannot be boring, right? It cannot be something like this. It needs to be it needs to be really entertaining or funny. Or the masters of TikTok is Duolingo, right? I mean, they have this character that makes it very entertaining. And you have other platforms. You have gaming platforms, right? So this is Twitch. So best practice for social media, depending on where you are, right? So Facebook, focus on the benefits, be timely, 80 characters or less, conversational tone. And Facebook limit is 63,000. However, if a company offer post 80 characters or less, is 66% higher engagement. So that's the best practices. And in Instagram, it's recommended a little more, 150 characters. The first three lines are critical. It's called front loading. Because what happens on Instagram often is that it cuts off after the third line. Lighthearted, authentic, emojis, right? Hashtags, cross promote or collab. Okay. So here are some ways to boost your social media, give it personality, fine tune your profiles, make it pop, tag others, hashtags, creative commenting, repurpose. So repurpose is when you have a content that works and you repurpose it for other things that are related to the same content. Or you can actually boost that post. Break your own news, experiment with different captions. So you can do something called A/B tests. Use social media for teaching, opinionated. So then you have examples for each of these. Okay. The only one that I don't agree is don't be afraid of being opinionated. That may help you in visibility, but it may have other issues. Okay. So be careful with that. Show up consistently. So again, SEMrush, Sprout Social will tell you best times to post. Twitter, persuasive tweets, focus on keywords. You can also use hashtags. LinkedIn, again, this is professional, so LinkedIn is a little different. We haven't talked much about YouTube, but YouTube is a place where people spend a lot of time on the platform because that's become like the substitute of television. So when you're creating on YouTube, the first thing is become a fan of what you create. So I create content for photography. So I follow some photographers that I admire and I subscribe to those creators that interest me. And then you need to figure out, well, what key stories you want to tell. In my case, I do tutorials, so it's really not stories. What things are important to your business? Well, in my case, not really a business. So let's talk about influencers. So with influencers, yes, they are very, very effective. That's why almost all spending in social media is going towards influencers. But it turns out that the macro influencers, these celebrities, usually have a negative return on investment. It turns out that the micro influencers are the ones in the best return on investment. Well, first of all, you don't pay as much money. And second of all, you have, here we have an example of PlayStation. Why would PlayStation use Stallman, who only has 50,000 followers? Well, because Stallman is a gamer. And the people who follow Stallman, he has a lot of credibility. Now, in terms of storytelling, I think you guys are all familiar with our most famous influencer. So this is a presentation that was done by Professor Ted Bolton, who was his professor and who, um, Alex Earl attributes to a lot of her success. So what the Alex Earl effect has a lot to do with developing storyboards. She takes them through a hero's journey, focus on try and survive. So begins with a story, sets up the journey, and then comes back with an outcome. And then you create drama so people want to see the outcome. So this is again one of our more popular posts at the beginning when she started talking about some of her personal struggles and things that people can relate for. And then, trending. What's trending? Okay, so that's what works. Email marketing. The important thing with email marketing is you want it to be visual, call to actions. I don't know if it was recording. Call to action. You have different types of emails. So welcoming email, somebody who's a new customer, newsletters, them. Promotional, which focuses on, some sort of incentive for why you should buy. Retention emails or loyalty emails. But something that is very important in all of them is the subject line. The subject line needs to be concise, to the point, and answer the question, why should I read this? So obviously the sender is important, but probably as important is the subject line. So here are some examples of media plans, and we use platforms like Hootsuite to do the calendar. Some of the metrics for email, so you have click-through rate, that's how many people clicked on the link you had an email. Open rate, just like it says, how many people of the recipients opened the email. Unique is unique to that person. So this is, in terms of recipients, this is unique recipients. So you could have opened more than one email from the same company that sent it to you. Delivery rate, so a lot of times it's not possible to deliver. Maybe the person changed the email address, or maybe they go to the spam or junk folder. Bounce rate, sorry, delivery rate if it goes to spam or junk folder. Bounce rate is when it doesn't even go through. So it could be a blocked email address or an email that doesn't exist. Unsubscribe, just like the word says, what percentage of people unsubscribe. So here we have a little bit about A/B tests. We talked about them. And this video is getting really long. Some trends of what's happening in social media. So communities is very, very important. So that's why Facebook is also still very popular, because it's very popular communities. So social media is the future. I would say the present of e-commerce. So we talked about TikTok. Again, this is not the latest on trends. This is from last year. I need to find the report for this year. I think it hasn't come out yet. Trust, very important. So that's why a lot of influencers are critical for the strategy. Social media can be used for customer service, right? So you can interact through Twitter or X. Emojis, 10 most popular emojis in customer service. This is funny. Very negative, rather negative. Okay, all right, you get the point. So again, a lot of stuff being handled through social media when it comes to customer service. This is predominant, especially with Gen Z. It's also becoming a way to search for things. So a lot of people are starting their search on social media like Instagram or TikTok instead of Google. And then you have, so we haven't talked about Reddit. Reddit has become extremely popular for almost any subject. And by the way, Reddit is critical if you want to appear in AI results, which we don't have time to talk about them. So they're ditching in celebrities for micro influencers, right? So this is the trend. And so the most mentioned industries. Okay, so these are different platforms that you can use. Short form video, right? But you know something that is really interesting is advertising started to look more and more like TV ads. And when I say that, they are now 30-second, 1 minute, and even longer. Funny, trendy, relatable. And this is funny, always the most important one, followed by relatable. But it could also be joy, sadness. Okay. So memes, there is many types of media, social media, educational, trendy, relatable. Uh, this is interesting. So Instagram has the highest ROI, followed by TikTok. So here are some of the goals that are used: engagement, brand awareness, followers, traffic to your website. What are the biggest challenges? Creating engaging content. So this is the number one challenge because you have to break through the clutter. There is a lot of content, a lot of competition, best times to post. So we don't have a lot of time to talk about Web3, but things like augmented reality, the metaverse, which was so popular and now nobody's talking about it. Then we have NFTs, also very popular. Nobody's talking about them again. But all of these things, think of them as different modes of doing advertising. So here we have a situation where Ariana Grande in TikTok had a Roblox concert, and there were like 30 million people that attended this concert. And then you have things on Roblox that sell for a lot of money, okay, like Gucci bags that sells for thousands of dollars. So this one sold for $4,000, and it's not real. It's a digital. It's like an NFT. It's unique. So again, this is. I think the metaverse will probably make a comeback. It's just the way to go to the metaverse with those goggles was not, but now they're getting better. Um, all right, everybody. Sorry that I had to rush a little bit through the social media, but the more complicated thing is the SEO, search and display. So we are in 1 hour and 13 minutes. I don't think I've ever done a video this long, but I hope it was helpful.